little show. No, very good. Just before we start, to get an idea of everyone in here, can we just, and for me to try and answer your questions, who here are farmers? Okay. Who here are running livestock? Doesn't matter whether they're sheep or elephants or cattle. Who are croppers, as in growing crops of any kind? Okay, so we've got mostly graziers here today. Okay, now that's all fine. Gives us a bit of an idea. Okay, how do we restore our farm, soils and profit? Profit's always got to be in that line. So I'll move on. Just my tiny little bit about me. I come from central New South Wales, a fair way from here. A bit more rainfall than some areas of the state here. About 600 mil rainfall, just granite soils. Nothing complicated, all very good about the soils. My son and myself on the property, and a couple of thousand acres. A few different enterprises, which I'll just go through very quickly. We've had merino sheep for 150 years, I suppose. Not me personally, but my great-grandparents started with merino sheep. We do some cropping, cattle trading sometimes. Merino started, my father started in 1949. Kelby started that we sell dogs all around the world, as well as Australia. And an interesting enterprise is we sell native grass seed. And the reason we sell native grass seed is that over the years we've restored the native grassland there, which has enabled to have another enterprise, which is actually one of the more profitable of the lot, because it's very low cost. This stuff just keeps growing without any inputs at all. How can we be more profitable? To be more profitable, we need to know what's gone wrong. And usually we don't. Often we don't even realise there's a problem. So, but I get around Australia quite a lot, and pre-virus I was in other countries as well. And we're not unique in stuffed soils in this country. Most of the soils I see all around the planet are in very poor state. Generally poor soil structure to start with, but basically dysfunctional soils. Hard compacted soils, and they're often covered in weeds. Everyone worries about weeds. Mostly we worry about weeds because we're trained to worry about them, so someone can sell us a herbicide. So anyway, we'll move on from that. But some of the reasons for the decline, the plough, which actually was developed probably 10,000 years ago, it was only a bit of a stick in the ground then, but ploughs, especially disc ploughs in this country, and cultivating has been one of the worst things we've ever invented, especially in relation to soil health. And not only that, it's destroyed our grasslands and our soil ecosystems and our farm ecosystems in the process. So, but on top of that, poor grazing management. And if we look at grazing management, probably one of the best examples of poor grazing management around the Middle East, that's been classed as the cradle of civilization, really, and agriculture started there about 10,000 years ago. And those areas now are basically a desert. And they're a desert because of goats. And everyone wants to blame the goats. But it's actually the humans managing the goats that's the problem. They've just been uncontrolled grazing and really turned those areas into deserts. And if we're not careful in this country, we will have the same problems. But also on top of that, excessive, and notice I've got the line of excessive use of fertiliser and pesticides is a major problem. Not only to our pockets, but especially to our soils. I might add before I go any further, I'm not an organic farmer. Nothing wrong with being organic, but I do use still some fertiliser. I don't use pesticides anymore as well. So I'm not going to go to rabbit on about just simply being organic or no inputs at all. Okay, so how can we fix our farms? And that soil nutrient decline, insect attack, all of those problems that we have on farm that we try to fix with inputs and things, and how can that be done without spending excessive amounts of money? And that's the problem to all of us, for all of us. So increasing fertiliser and pesticides actually won't fix the problem, because lack of fertiliser isn't the problem. Just as lack of Panadol isn't the reason we get a headache. So the farm and soil ecosystems are broken. Now, no one talks about farms as ecosystems, just some wanky idea, you know, but our farms do function and should function as ecosystems, as soil should too. If our farms function as ecosystems, all those problems we got will actually go away, almost like magic. But no, old Mother Nature is very clever, and natural systems will drive this very well for us if we get out of the way and let it happen. So, as I said before, our farm soils have become dysfunctional. Now, that's why we have to add ever-increasing amounts of fertiliser and pesticides. The soils are no longer functioning as they should. And as Oliver demonstrated here this morning and got us all standing up looking like idiots, but really demonstrated well what our soils are doing. You know, they're alive. Our soil is not dirt. It's the most complex system on the planet, really. So we need to allow the farm to function as an ecosystem, farm and soil. We will then get better nutrient cycling, which means less fertiliser, no insect attack, no insecticide, no plant disease, no fungicide, no animal disease, healthier animals, less drenching, all that stuff. And that actually adds up to more profit because we don't spend that money. We don't spend as much money on those things. So, but this is really simple. It seems like it's really complicated. I've got nothing to sell you, I might add. So, we need to start by fixing our soil. You've probably worked that out by now. But this is really easy to do. Just grow more plants. Plants will fix our soil. And if we grow more plants, we'll make more profit. It is that simple. But, so how do we change and what do we change to? If we modify, and we only need to modify, there's nothing complicated about this at all. If we modify the way we grow crops and graze our animals, all these things start to happen. We will start to fix our soil structure, improve nutrient cycling, improve water infiltration, improve soil water holding capacity and increase soil carbon. We increase soil carbon also by, guess what, growing more plants. So all of that then starts to reduce inputs of fertiliser and pesticides. I haven't got any cattle at the moment, but I like this slide. Grazing management, I'm only going to touch a tiny little bit on grazing management, because I know Millie's talking about that later, and we've got other talks on grazing management. So the way we graze simply isn't working. And we know that by the decline in our grasslands from the last, say, 150 years or so. Kills grasslands and pastures. It also destroys the soil ecosystem and the farm ecosystem. Whoop, don't go too far. Did too. Now, a grazing rotation, which sometimes you mention a grazing rotation, everyone goes shock horror and don't listen to anything else. But this is fairly simple. A grazing rotation that allows plant recovery time, that's all it is. Plant recovery time before that area is regrazed again will start to restore our soils and grasslands and get better animal performance. So that's simply all it is, just giving giving plants time to recover before they're regrazed. So, and if we get that right, it will increase perennial grassland species, it will decrease annual weeds, and it will help restore the soil ecosystem. That's just only one photo of what I'm doing at home. It's more rainfall than many areas here, but I've now got 75 paddocks and work on a 3 to 4 month recovery time before they get back again, but even longer than that. Some of the really marginal areas here or anywhere will need longer than that. Could be even up to 10 or 12 months recovery period. So, growing crops for grain and livestock. As I said before, ploughing has been very destructive, but modern cropping methods have really only replaced the plough with a boom spray and pesticides or herbicides. We haven't really changed our philosophy of farming and how crops are grown. Now, before I go on any further from that, zero tilling is a very, very good method of cropping. It's certainly a step in the right direction, but maybe we can do a bit better than that. So how do we change? Change the way crops are grown. Now, if we look at this, single crop species are a large part of the problem. And there's reasons for that as well. So, and we can change that. We don't necessarily need a single plant species. Perennial and annual cover crops can help restore the farm ecosystems and soil ecosystem. I'm going to just touch a tiny bit on that. Tom's going to speak, Tom in again. Tom's going to speak about that this afternoon, so especially annual cover crops. So I won't talk much about that. Tom will be talking about that. So annual cover crops create ground cover, control weeds, conserve water and help restore the soil. Now if we look at that photo, it looks like a veggie garden. When we've known about, like we put straw on veggie gardens all the time. And I bet just about every woman in the audience here would know how to grow a veggie garden. And many of them also watch Costa's gardening show on Sundays, and we all should, because we'll learn more about agriculture by watching Costa than just about anything else. So that's some of the things we do with growing covers. It conserves water, control weeds, all the things that it does in a garden. In other words, we should farm a bit closer to how we garden. Perennial cover cropping is, I developed this nearly 30 years ago now. It is 30 years ago, which is pasture cropping, but it's actually perennial cover cropping. And this photo here, and I won't dwell on it, this is just sowing a crop this year in May. The grass you see in the foreground is actually perennial grass, it's perennial native grass. But it's not growing, it's the middle of winter, it's gone into dormancy, it's gone to sleep for the winter. So it doesn't affect the crop at all if it's gone to sleep for the winter. So that grass acts as a cover, a perennial cover that we don't have to sow. It just turns up every year, providing it rains. And we can use it as a cover. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail on how we do this, but we do almost always mulch it with a mob, in my case with a mob of sheep, which add manure and urine onto that paddock as well, which helps the crop. So, and that's a summer grass, which you don't have much left here in South Australia. You used to. Your grasslands had these species in them originally as well. You can, while I think of it, you can reverse it around. If you have summer rainfall, any summer rainfall, or enough summer rainfall to grow something in the summer, even a forage crop, your winter species will go into summer dormancy and you can plant into those too. So you can reverse it if you've got enough rain. So just really quickly, a few photos here, just a cropping sequence. That's zero till through that litter, a bit later on in the crop. There, just before harvest and harvesting. This photo here depends on who looks at this photo, whether they think that's a bloody disaster or whether it's okay. Now, if a dedicated cropper that has no animals at all looks at that, most will say, look at all the weeds in that crop. Those weeds happen to be the perennial summer grass, perennial native summer grass, which is just emerging under the crop as the season warms up. Now, if you say that same photo to a grazier that's running sheep or cattle, they will say exactly the opposite to that. They will say, oh wow, look at all the feed in the crop. Depends on which way you look at it. But all that feed in the crop adds a lot to the profit in these methods of cropping. So just to add, this is a little bit just some research work done in West Australia by the Department of Ag at the time, 2008, so they've been playing around with over there for a while. West Australia has very few warm season summer grasses, so what they've been doing is sowing warm season grasses, in this case cat and panic. There's things like rose grass, digit grass, many of them that you can sow, which function just like our native grasses in the summer. And they've been planting, in this case, barley into that when it's dormant. When the gat and panic is dormant. And yields are quite respectable, 2.8 tonnes per hectare. And again, stock feed as well. So that's one thing that, because the rainfall in West Australia is very much winter dominant rainfall, so it's a bit similar to here. That's why I put that slide up there, to show that it is possible in this environment. And also, you have a lot better soils than they have in West Australia. Lynn will probably start chucking rocks at me in a minute for saying that. So, multi-species crops and covers. Multi-species are, in this case, pasture cropping, but so I'm sowing it into that grassland. But you can do this very conventionally as well, and get similar type of, I'm going to talk about grazing here in a minute, similar types of results with that. That's just a photo of, looks really untidy, lots of things growing in there, different species. The dry grass in there is the dormant summer grass. Animals do really well on that, and we seem to think that our sheep and cattle, like an old cow or a ewe, will think that doesn't look very good, not lush and green. But if you don't tell the old cow that it's no good, they'll eat it. So, but surprisingly, what happens is that they'll eat the green and then they'll mix it with that dry. It's actually healthier for them than just a lush green feed. We know, anyone who graziers here, and I better not talk too long, if we've got a paddock of oats, usually, nothing wrong with oats, a good stock feed, and we put them off of cattle in there to graze, we know what's going to happen before we even put them in there. In about 2 days' time, there'll be cow shit all over that paddock. So if it's going straight through them like that for a while, it's not much good for them. They don't scour on these mixes where there's a bit of roughage in there. So there's a few advantages in that. This is just a mix that I use. It doesn't matter working out what plant species to have in a multi-species mix is just you're open to your imagination, and often what is the cheapest you can find and what's maybe in your silo. Keep the costs as low as possible. Now, some of the advantages of these types of crops, they do produce far superior stock feed, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Great improvements in soil health, nutrient cycling, carbon, that we can add nitrogen with legumes as well. Weed control, we get weed control by quick canopy closure and alleliopathic effects from some of these plants. Insect control we get from adding flowering plants in there to attract beneficial insects. We need to remember that these mixes, multi-species mixes, are actually also biological soil primers. They will prime your soil for a following crop and get really good crop results after these multi-species mixes are sown. Now, also, really good grazing performance. There was a trial I did at home in 2020, and it was a Landcare MLA funded trial. I was seeing some really good results, just animal performance on these multi-species crops. And I was looking, so I thought, oh, someone would have done some work on this, and we've got some data on this. There was none on animal performance on these. So I said, well, we need to do some to get some data on this stuff. So that's how this happened. Just a small paddock, they split it in half, then split the merino lambs into 2 mobs. So I used a bit of fertiliser on this. That's the mix I used, a bit different to normal. It was a bit hard to get seed. It was after the couple of dry years. That's just costs, not counting machinery. Cost of seed and fertiliser was about $40 dearer for the multi-species mix for seed. There was also barley in that multi-species mix as well. Barley in one side and barley and those other things in the other. So grazing results. Gets very interesting. I hope you can read that. I won't go through all that, but they, on a daily weights, they were double weight gains daily, 149 to 300. They were on there for 57 days, 2 months basically. We weighed them 3 times. Just on the single species barley, they put on 8.5 kilos in that 57 days. And on the multi-species, they doubled that and they were 17 kilos. So that's quite impressive. Now, if we look at the figures, remember this was done in 2020 and lamb prices then were $7. Unfortunately, they're not $7 now. So these figures down here are for 2020 when they were actually paying decent money for lambs. So, but the profit on each paddock is virtually double on 1,100 compared to 2,000. And that the only difference is the mix of species in the crop compared to a single species. The other thing which was unexpected, did some soil measurements, and this was only 6 months after the crop was in there that we obviously did before and after. The carbon had increased by 21% compared to minus 15, multi-species compared to barley. Nitrogen had also increased and the barley decreased. Phosphorus, they both increased, but the multi-species was 125 and compared to 62. Calcium, magnesium also increased in that. They didn't all increase, some stayed the same, some decreased in both lots. So, trials and research. What I did on the property at home. Now, There's a lot of other ways that we can do this. There's methods we can use to restore our farms and soils. This is just what I did. So don't just simply get stuck on that. Think about other things we can do as well. I changed the grazing management in 93 and also changed the way I grew the crops to pasture cropping in around the same time. And I developed multi-species pasture cropping in 2010. Now, the property at home is one of the most researched in Australia. And the reason that I did that was when I first changed in the 90s, I could see these changes starting to happen, like the soil getting softer, more perennial plants starting to emerge, all of this type of thing. And it was so dramatic, I thought, now no Barossa's going to believe this, because it was just contrary to what we'd been told is supposed to happen. So I encouraged as much research work as I could, and things like CSIRO and most of the universities also have done work at home. Now, one thing that has happened is we've restored the grassland at home, and now there's 80% native grasses in pretty well all the paddocks, and that's gone from 10% to that figure. There was 60% weeds when we started measuring and monitoring this stuff, so it was basically a property full of weeds. 5% now. Now there's 60 native grassland species there. I might add, one of the things that happen when we're sowing crops into grasslands, and especially oats and these multi-species crops, it stimulates the germination of seed that's in the soil. Now, I haven't sown any of those grassland species. I've managed for them, but pasture cropping and sowing an oat crop in there, and we really would be nice to get some data on this. We don't know exactly why it happened, but it stimulated the germination of seed that was in the soil. So I stumbled across a way of restoring grasslands really rapidly and quite cheaply. And I think what's going on, and it would be interesting, we've got a room full of a few soil scientists here, and I think what's happening, the root exudates from the oat crops and those plants has restored the soil and the soil around the rhizosphere of the oat plants, and that has created a safe environment for those perennial seeds to germinate in. And that's what we think is happening. That, unfortunately, we don't have any actual data on that, other than it's happened all over the world. There's been some research done in the US, in Salina at the Land Institute. They saw the same thing and recorded the same thing. But just about everyone that does this sees the same thing, that perennial plants will start to regenerate. Okay. Now, we've no insecticide. We've used no insecticide for 25 years. We don't get insect attack in crops or pastures. How? Well, if you want to know more about that, ask me later when we do that, have questions, because I was going to dong with the bell here in a minute. So, we haven't used fungicides, including seed dressings, for over 25 years. We don't get crop or pasture disease. And the same reason, if you wanted to find out about that, ask me, but I think Glenn might touch a little bit on that. It's about restoring the soil. We haven't used fertiliser in my father's era we used a lot of superphosphate, or he did, and it won't go into it too far, but we got burnt out in 1979, and I just decided at that point, no fertiliser, couldn't afford it, we were broke. So, haven't used pasture fertiliser, superphosphate, for 43 years. I've reduced crop fertiliser by 70%. The pasture gets better and better and better, and the crops have not seen any yield decline with that. So how? So there's a little bit, well, this is just one area that's been monitored really quite closely. My property on the left and my neighbour there, who happens to be my brother. And what we measured here was the change. He stayed the same and I changed. Changed the grazing, changed the cropping, just like I've been saying. This soil profile, 500 mil down to there, both paddocks. The one on the left is also on the left there. Now, interestingly, the soil carbon increased by about 200%, and now it's sequestered almost 60 tonne of carbon per hectare, which is actually 213 tonne of carbon dioxide it has removed from the atmosphere and put in the soil through plants. Remember, plants are the only things that can do this. You can't buy something in a bag, well, other than seed, to do that. So, that soil holds far more water than the other one. And interestingly, all the soil nutrients have increased by an average of 162% on the left compared to the right. And that's trace elements and the like, except for the stuff we don't want. Aluminium, iron and sodium, they actually went the other way. Our soils seem to be able to balance themselves if we give them half a chance. So, and the pH has changed from 5.2 to 6. There's been no lime put on either of those paddocks. So, is it profitable? Yep, now we save over $100,000 annually. That is money we just don't spend anymore, compared to my father's era and also when I first started as well. So, it's money that we don't spend, and we don't spend it because of saving in fertiliser, saving in pesticides, saving in sheep drench, all of those things. So we're $100,000 ahead before we start. Now, one of the things that I found, I started to do the calculations on this. I wonder how much money I've saved over the last 20 or 30 years. And it worked out to about $2 million. And which was the worst thing I ever did, calculate that, because I started to worry then that I had no idea where the money went. So, so just to sort of tie this up and finish off, annual income now is higher than it was in that high input industrial type of agriculture. We're running more livestock now than before. Crop yields are similar, wool quality is better. We now harvest over a couple of tonne of native grass seed a year. Soil organic carbon levels are increasing, all the soil nutrients are increasing, and while all that's happening, we're saving $100,000, not counting labour. So we've also saved labour as well. I didn't put the labour on there because then the figures would look ridiculous. No one would believe if you put $200,000 on there. But that's the reality of it. So how do we restore our farms? Change the way we graze animals, change the way we grow crops. Well, this is the way I restored my farm. I developed multi-species pasture cropping and restored the grassland, but all of that really. The more good ideas that we get, or methods that we can think of but put them together on a property, it's probably not one thing that we can fix our properties with, but a combination of works really well. So, how do we fix our properties? Grow more plants. It's bloody easy, really, and we can become more profitable. Thank you.